Okay. Is everybody out there ready? Y'all ready? Okay, here we go. 1, 2. Good morning, everybody. That song I just played for you with the one fluff at the end is called the Wabash Blues. Now, let me give you some data on that, all right? That song, the writer is unknown. It had been around as a melody for years, but finally, in 1921, a guy by the name of Isham Jones and his orchestra recorded it. It sold over 2 million copies. At that time, the population of the United States was about 105.7 million. Right now, we're over 3 times that size. So if that song, and it did sell 2 million in those days, that would be the equivalent of that song selling 6 million copies. That's a hit. Anyway, just a little more data on it. It had been around as a melody, and it was known as the trombone jazz, but I don't know who wrote it. Just had hung around as a melody, so he picked it up, recorded it, and then since then there's been a lot of people who've recorded more currently, but 1921. Anyway, I thought I'd do that for you because it's something that right now any Dixieland band is going to play that song. You were to go to New Orleans or some club where you are where they have a Dixieland band, say, how about playing the Wabash Blues? They'd know it. So there you go. There's your cultural enrichment, so you can show off and talk to people about things that are very little known about them. Anyway, where do you go to hear stuff like that? Right here, Life After Scientology, and I'm your host, Ron Miscavige. So let me put my horn away and we'll get going because we've got a very interesting show for you today. And I advise you, listen carefully because this is stuff that you don't hear about, but you're going to hear about it today. And get as many people to tune into this so they can see one of the more criminal aspects of the Church of Scientology and what they do with their membership. So now, before we get into the show itself, if you're not a patron, why not join up today? Go to my website, therealronmiscavige.com, and you can see how to do it. We depend on that membership and the people becoming patrons. And it's not expensive. It's like, $1 or $2 or $5 or $10 or whatever you want to do. But people do it on a regular monthly basis, and it helps with the show itself. Let me say the word I want to use. It helps with the ongoingness of the show, which I made up that word. So today we have a guest who's been on before, and I was going to get into what he has, but rather than do that, I'd rather have him do it because this guy has a blog called the Scientology Money Project, and he's been working on it for 5 years. So without any further words from me, please welcome Jeffrey Augustine. Good morning, Jeffrey, and the stage is yours.
Oh, good morning, Ron. Love the trumpet playing. It's so...
Well, I've been, listen, I'm 83 years old. I started playing in bars when I was 13. That means I have 70 years as a professional musician. And in those days, when I played at the first club I played at was called the AmVets, short for American Veterans. We got $2 an hour, 5-hour gig. We got $10, but I could go to JCPenney's on Monday and for $1.50 get a pair of jeans. So I was flushed,
Yeah, turning your talent into cash at a young age.
Yeah.
Impressive. 70 years as a musician.
Oh, and I've
So-
enjoyed all of it. It's a wonderful thing to do. Anybody out there who is learning an instrument, please stick with it, because you can have a lot of fun with music and make some money on it too. But
yeah.
the enjoyment that comes from seeing other people enjoy it is really the pleasure in playing, to be honest with you.
Well, Ron, I like Sunday mornings because I get to hear you play the trumpet. I'm one of those guys who not musical at all, but I love listening to music. But
Good.
if you gave me musical notes, I couldn't do it. So what we're going to do today, excuse me, is cover Scientology and contracts.
Wait, Jeff,
Yes.
you got to tell them about your blog, Scientology Money Project.
Okay. Well, my blog is ScientologyMoneyProject.com. It's been around since 2014, and it covers legal, financial, and propaganda. So those are the three. And you know, sometimes I'll diverge into personalities, people, issues, topical stuff. Yesterday, I posted some things about what's happening at a Scientology-owned firm in New York City called GPB Capital, and did that on a podcast with Chris Shelton. And it's interesting because that firm was raided by the FBI twice, and they have $1.8 billion assets under management. So there's a lot of interesting breaking stuff, as well as a structural analysis of the church, because the project began basically with very simple questions, Ron.
Yeah.
Spending 30 years in sales, one thing you do when you get a client, you have to vet them. So I worked mainly for Philips, the big Dutch company, and Siemens, the German company. So if you think that you can just buy from us, and I was business to business, I sold scientific lighting sources, among other things. So I was involved in lasers, spectrophotometers, medical, surgical lighting. So to come and do business with my company, we would have to vet you. Are you a real manufacturer? What do you do? Do we want to do business with you? If you're not, do we want to send you through a distributor? And these questions in business, led me to look at Scientology as a business. So if you begin with really simple questions in sales, but really analyzing any organization, you begin with really simple questions.
Well,
So
give me an example. What would be a question?
okay, a really simple question is, what is the Church of Scientology? What is it really?
There you go.
Well, what you learn when...
Before we get in, I've heard that there is no such thing as the Church of Scientology International, that it doesn't exist.
Well, actually, the Sea Org doesn't exist. Church of Scientology International exists, but it's not a membership organization. So let me correct it a little bit. The Church of Scientology International has no members because it's a non-membership corporation. It can't have any members. So nobody belongs to the church. It has a board of directors. So if it can't have members, what do Scientologists belong to?
Uh-huh.
And so those are the kinds of questions you begin. The Church of Scientology is as the church told the IRS, it's an umbrella term that applies to all churches of Scientology. So let's start at the very beginning.
But with no members.
Church of Scientology International cannot have members.
Okay, I want people to remember that, because these are big red flags sticking out, and I see that you've investigated all these things, so you have a lot of stuff to say.
Yeah, I've looked into it, but like I said, when you have to be on simple, basic questions that are powerful. So let's start with, what is a Scientologist?
Okay.
And then we'll find out what a Scientologist belongs to, because L. Ron Hubbard made a big deal out of groups. The group's everything. Well, legally speaking, what is the group? How does it exist? Does it exist? Because everything, Scientology is a hall of mirrors. So when you get into it, you start going, wait a minute. So the Scientology Money Project started out as a research blog, because I wanted to figure out for myself what it was and get it down on paper and help other people. So let's start with a common misperception. People think if you take $100,000 walk into a Scientology org, you can get auditing, right?
Right.
No, it doesn't work like that. They have a series of things that they have to do. So let's start with, how does someone become a Scientologist?
Okay.
First thing you have to do is join their membership organization called the International Association of Scientologists. That's the Church of Scientology International's official membership organization. So the church is here, Church of Scientology International, and then IAS is here. They're two legally separate corporations. So you belong to the membership organization in order to get services from one of the church's licensees. So all the orgs, what the Church of Scientology International does is it licenses all the orgs. They operate off licenses.
I
So
got it.
it's like a franchise system. So Church
Wow.
of Scientology LA is a legally separate corporation from the Church of Scientology New York, from the flagship from Flagland Base. So CSI is an administrative body that issues licenses, all the way down to the level of WISE, Narconon, ABLE, all the secular groups.
Hmm.
Now, who owns the licenses? Well, the Religious Technology Center owns the majority of the licenses. So COB RTC David Miscavige is the chief licensor. So he gives CSI a master license to sub-license everything else. Some of the intellectual property that Hubbard created belongs to the Church of Spiritual Technology, but it's basically a captive group of RTC. So Scientology Incorporated is really intellectual property that's licensed to Scientology entities exclusively, corporations.
Jeff, before we go any further, just let me say this. I got in Scientology in 1970. It was not that way in those days, as far as I know. Maybe it was, so you can correct me on it. Maybe it was, but it was so hidden that people didn't know about it until recently. But even as far as you mentioning of franchising,
Yeah.
Missions were not called missions in those days. They actually were called franchises.
And they were.
Yeah. Well, they absolutely are now, even. I mean, you can say what you want. But anyway, I just wanted to interject that. So, somewhere along the line, did this change, or was it always that way? And now it's out in the open. That's a question I'd like to know. That's all.
Well, when you look at Scientology, the development, especially when L. Ron Hubbard was alive, Scientology is a moving target. So you have to look at what period of time you're considering, whether it's right now, 2019, because it's quite different from 1970 when you joined. It's very different, and in a lot of different ways. For one thing, the old mother church, the old administrative licensing body, was called the Church of Scientology of California. If you remember when you joined, Church of Scientology of California was the head organization. Now that organization no longer exists. It was disincorporated. It was disposed of quietly and without sorrow. And you know what happened when after the FBI raids in Snow White, 1977? Long story short, they did the new corporations. So there was Church of Spiritual Technology, RTC, and CSI, right? And Church of Scientology of California engaged in annulment to the benefit of L. Ron Hubbard, and it was just quietly disincorporated after tax exemption for the new churches. So that's all. So it's very different. But instead of getting up into the minutia, let's start with how you become a Scientologist.
Okay.
So usually you get a free 6-month membership into the IAS. The church will give you a free 6-month membership. I have a 6-month membership card in my files, and so you get the 6-month. But now here's the exact sequence for people who new Scientology watchers. The minute you start Scientology in the modern era, this is called the David Miscavige era, right?
Right.
You have to see a film called Orientation. And, that's the film with Larry Anderson where he says, you can do Scientology. We can also, blow your brains out or jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
That film. And
yeah. And Larry Anderson also asked for his money back.
I know. He
They
wanted
had to reshoot that. I don't know if the reshot movie is out there now, but that's a little background on Larry Anderson.
Well, the Orientation film is exactly what it says it is. It orients you. It introduces you to Scientology. So they take you into the bookstore, and you get to meet different divisions. People who are representing different divisions. And so they orient you. Now,
Right.
when you finish watching the film, you sign the orientation contract. It's the attestation regarding the film orientation. So
Mhm.
you sign and agree that you've seen the film. And here's the number one opening gambit. You agree that the Church of Scientology is a religion. That's the first thing Scientology wants you to acknowledge is that it's a religion. So
Mhm.
you actually sign, date, witness a contract. I agree that the Church of Scientology is a religion. Now, this is important because when you agree that it's a religion, they take you behind their First Amendment
Got
protections.
it. Yeah.
So the lawyers have created a path into the Church of Scientology. So you're an IAS member, and you agree that it's a religion. That's important. Now you could do some basic low-level courses, but really when you get on the bridge, start your Purif, all that stuff, you're going to sign a contract called Religious Services Enrollment Application, Agreement, and General Release. This is a 7-page contract.
Right. Say that again, the name of that.
It's called Religious Services Enrollment Application, Agreement, and General Release. So let's break it down.
Okay.
So Religious Services Enrollment Application. So you're applying for religious services to the Church of Scientology where you're going to receive services. So let's just say it's here in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to apply for religious services. Now I'm going to sign an agreement and a general release. What are you agreeing to? What are you releasing the church from? Well, these are good questions. First, it defines Scientology as, studying the human spirit, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to agree to participate according to Scientology's rules, ecclesiastical governance. Now, that's important. In America, consent belongs to the individual. So you're having to consent to be governed by Scientology's rules. So this is a very slow agreement where they're going to start taking away your rights. They're going to start stripping your power. So
Now,
when you go,
yeah. Now, when a person signs this, there's no way in hell they know what they're signing. I mean, there must be some short story given, like, "Oh, this is just a technical thing. Don't worry." What would be a pattern? Do you have any idea, Jeff?
well, generally it's like, hey, before we get you started on okay, here's part of the psychology of it, Ron. Scientology is designed to find your ruin. That's your first experience with Scientology, right?
Yes.
You'll do the OCA, the Oxford Capacity Analysis, their free stress test,
Mm-hmm.
which has nothing to do with Oxford University, but it sounds impressive.
Yep.
The Oxford Capacity Analysis. It's an
Oh,
IQ test.
it sure sounds legitimate, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And then you get a graph printed out when you do the test, and they're going to show, Ron, you have some insecurities around women or whatever. Whatever. It's going to be, typically a young person. You have some insecurities about your parents, about college, about the opposite,
Mm-hmm.
your neighbors, whatever. They're going to find your ruin. And maybe you secretly are gay and you haven't come out. I don't know what it is, right?
Yeah.
But they're designed to find your ruin and psychologically destabilize you. Then you agree that this is a religion, first contract, that
I
can
got it.
help you. But before we in Scientology can help you, there's just some paperwork you need to sign.
Okay.
It's the kind of thing like, hey, this is just some paperwork.
Yep. I got
It's
it.
like when you go to buy a car. These freaking these car dealerships, like, if you can just approve the paperwork. Well, no, you're entering into a contract that's
Yeah.
probably in their favor. And so in Scientology, before we can provide you religious services, they'll tell you just sign some paperwork. So you basically agree that you're responsible for whatever happens to you, and you're going to be bound by the church's ecclesiastical governance. So you're giving your consent to be governed by them, which is really bad because that allows them to do sec checks and do a whole bunch of other stuff we'll get into. But you're agreeing to it up front. anyone who sat down and went to an attorney or just read through these would say, I'm not signing this.
Yeah.
Okay, now, for example, you agree that no Scientology church is under any duty or obligation to return any portion of any donation I make. You're never going to get your
Right off the bat, you've signed away that right.
yeah, you're not going to get your money back ever. However, they may give it to you if they decide. But and you also agree that you're not going, if you ask for any money back, you're not entitled to it. But if you ask for it back, you cannot involve an attorney. And it's completely up to the church whether you get your money back or not. So they start right up front with, you're not going to get your money back. And they tell you that in writing. And you might be like sobbing in tears because they found your ruin, your psychological vulnerability, your guilty secret, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And you agree to follow their exact procedures if you want your money back. So the money's an important thing. That should be a big red flag to anybody that they're talking about the money. It's almost like a bad prenuptial agreement.
Yeah.
Like yes, we'll get married, dear, but I'd like you to sign these contracts first, because if you ever leave me, you're not getting anything at all.
Oh boy.
Nothing.
Yeah. I see this. In other words, this is done. Maybe they just found your ruin, and you feel so sometimes relieved, sometimes disgusted with yourself or whatever, so that, okay, now we can help you. Just here, sign off on a couple. You just poo-poo it and just sign any goddamn thing. Just like at a car dealership. I will bet 999 out of 1,000 people don't read those agreements.
No, you're going to read through pages and pages of this, or, and that's why you can get hit with hidden fees, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
When you get a cell phone, you don't read the contract.
Nope.
When you go to the emergency room at the hospital, you got to sign a bunch of stuff. But, if you think you're having a heart attack or you broke your knee or whatever, you're not going to read the page.
Yeah.
You're not going to be sitting there with a broken knee going, oh, let me read the contracts. Let me call my lawyer. You're just going to sign and get your, screaming bodily disaster emergency fixed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this contract goes on and on and length. Now, if you go to my blog, the Scientology Money Project, in the top banner, it says how Scientology traps its members. You click on that link. You can get all 4 contracts in my blog and download them as PDFs, read them for yourself.
Wow.
So I invite people to go read them for yourself. It is just quite shocking to read it. And now you also, L. Ron Hubbard in 1964 wrote a policy in which she said, we have found that waivers, getting people to sign waivers or releases of liability, have helped us reduce lawsuits. So you waive your basic rights to sue the church. You abandon, surrender, and waive your rights. And you say you're doing it freely and unconditionally. And you also don't let anyone else get involved. So you waive your rights to have your family get involved.
Yeah.
And should anyone acting on your behalf have a lawyer, you don't want that, right? So you agree to binding arbitration to be subject to the International Justice Chief. Ron, can you tell?
When I was in the Sea Org, we signed away our rights to get our mail without being checked. In other words, we had to sign a paper saying that it was okay for security to open up our incoming mail, our outgoing mail, and read everything that was said to us or we said on a mail going out. And you had no choice. You just literally had no choice. You couldn't say, I'm not signing this. You're in the Sea Org.
No, so they make you sign a thing to say you can intercept my mail, read my mail.
Yeah.
Incoming, outgoing. Well, that's signing away another right.
Yeah, I know. See,
this is the point. The church is making you sign it, so they have contracts. So if anything goes wrong, they have contracts to show the court, Your Honor, he signed this.
Right.
And the judge, he or she might be pissed. You also agree that you have no mental or emotional disorders, no criminal offenses. You're not connected to any person who's hostile to Scientology. So they're going to make sure that, so if you said, well, my mom or my wife, who are my dad, doesn't want me to do Scientology, that's going to have to be handled before you get services. They want to make sure there's what's called no PTS condition, right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you're not a criminal, you're not on the run from the law, you're not a fugitive from justice. And So you sign this contract. This is the signature page.
Hmm.
And they're going to witness it and sign it. Now it goes to, in Scientology, the Church of Scientology International has a department called the Department of Valuable Documents, ValDocs for
Right.
short. In the science. So all these go to the Department of Valuable Documents. Okay. Do you think you're ready to start auditing now? No, you're not. There's still more paperwork you have to sign. Now, this next contract, agreement and general release regarding spiritual assistance. Now that's a weird title, agreement and general release regarding spiritual assistance. If it's spiritual assistance, why do I have to relieve the Church of Scientology of any liability for spiritual assistance?
Wow. Look, I just want to interject a little point here. Can anybody imagine any other religion getting you to sign all these contracts? Like the Catholic Church, before you can go to confession or to receive your first Holy Communion, could you see them making a little kid waiving his rights in case his first Holy Communion didn't go right and he decided to sue them? Or any of these contracts. It is not a religious thing. This is a business. And it's right up front telling you, we are a business and we don't want to have any trouble with you. So you're going to sign away all your rights, no matter if we screw you up and you have no rights to come after us, and we're going to keep your money. Basically, that's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, you're correct. But because they're a religion in America, religions can get away with murder.
Yeah.
And that's part of a deeper issue of religion in America. Now, I call this document about spiritual assistance the kidnap contract because in Scientology, they have what's called the introspection rundown. And that's where Lisa McPherson died. They basically, you agree to let the church kidnap you, lock you up for an indefinite duration of time if your case supervisor deems that you've gone type 3, had a psychotic break. So you agree that you don't, in case you go insane. Some of Scientology's very intrusive, intense, repetitive contracts have caused some people to have a psychotic break. They go crazy. They snap.
Well, that did happen to Lisa McPherson. Didn't she take off all of her clothes and was walking down Fort Harrison Avenue that way?
Yeah, she had a minor fender bender car accident, right?
Yeah.
So she gets out of the car, strips naked, and walks down the street. The police show up. They take her to the emergency room, of course. It's the right thing to do. And they're going to do what's called the Baker Act. Here in California, it's a 5150, but it's a 72-hour psychiatric lockup so that you don't harm yourself or others, right?
Yeah.
Now, Scientologists showed up and said, we don't want her to go to a psychiatrist because we're opposed to psychiatry. We want to take her with us. And they released her because they had a document like this. This document says that if you go psychotic, you don't want to be locked up, and you're as a matter of religion, you're opposed to psychiatry in all forms.
I got it.
So the church, you give the church permission for the Sea Org members to show up, take you out of a psychiatric hospitalization and take you, and they'll handle you. Now, this piece of paper is very important because you're signing it in one state of mind. You don't know what Scientology is going to do to you.
Right.
On that basis, in your current frame of mind, whether you found you're ruined and you're vulnerable, you're not really thinking through the consequences of these guys could actually lock me up in a hotel room, pass notes under the door, not talk to me. And when they determine I'm back to normal, they'll let me go. No other religion can kidnap you. I mean, it's just nuts. It's so.
Well, they did it with Lisa McPherson, didn't they?
Yeah, and there was a lawsuit that they spent over $100 million on because David Miscavige was going to be criminally charged. The church was going to be criminally charged. That was a very dangerous lawsuit. And they got the coroner to change the cause of death after years of just hammering this doctor. She was put under intense pressure. Once the criminal charges were gone, there was a civil case that was going to go to court for wrongful death. They settled on the courtroom steps with Lisa McPherson's estate.
Wow.
for some undetermined amount of money. So this is to me, this is a terrifying document.
No kidding.
And
Man, that's terrible.
well, that's what you're going to sign in order to get. Now, are we done yet? Nope, we're not done. And you're thinking, how long does this go on? Well, the last one is agreement regarding confidential religious files. So in Scientology, as you get auditing, you know how the auditor will make notes
Oh yeah, they
of
call
your
them worksheets.
worksheets, and they go in your PC folders. PC
Right.
means pre-clear. The pre-clear is the one being audited. So your PC folders are considered confidential, but they're not, and we'll get into that. But your PC folders are, they call them a record of your spiritual progress. And they're written in kind of a shorthand. And you basically agree that you don't own your PC folders. The church owns all of your PC folders forever in perpetuity. You, your heirs, assigns, will never be allowed to see your PC folders or own them. So all the dirty secrets you give up in an auditing session, the church owns those forever. So if you've embezzled money, had affairs, used drugs, whatever you've done, right?
Yeah.
Cross state lines with, millions of dollars in cash hidden under your car seat, carry concealed weapons, all of the above, whatever you give up in session, the church writes down, and the church encourages you to do this, do these confessionals.
Yeah.
Write up your overts and withholds.
But the reason they give for it is quite a bit different than the real reason that they want it. They say clean hands make a happy heart or something like that. So that if you give up all your sins, you tell all, then you'll be clean and you'll feel better, which is nothing could be further than from the truth than the reason that they want it, as you're just pointing out right now. Do you agree, Jeff?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's there's a value spiritually, psychologically to confessing your sins. That's why the Catholic Church has had confessional forever, so you feel clean before God and your church and your family. However, the church keeps these on files, and we know, if you leave the church and publicly speak out, all that dirt gets thrown at you on hate websites.
Oh, yeah. Because I'll tell you, I was raised a Catholic. I used to go to confession. And to be honest with you, I felt better after doing the confession. No priest ever had a notepad writing down the things that I said or wondered my name. So I went in, cleaned up my bad deeds for the week, and walked out. And this is no kidding. I used to vow to become a better kid that week and try not to do those things. So there was a value to it. And I saw it even as a child. But never did a priest have a secretary or a tape recorder or a video camera taking down what I said.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because in the Church of Scientology, all auditing rooms, your auditing is recorded, audio and video, and those digital files are kept permanently by the church.
Right.
So you agree to let them do that. So okay, now where have we gone? We basically, you surrendered all your rights over to the church. You're not going to use an attorney. You're not going to sue them. They own all your secrets. If you go psychotic, you agree to let them lock you up. Also, if you hurt yourself on church property, let's say you slip on some icy steps and break your knee, twist your ankle, you're not going to collect any money from them. In fact, what you're going to do is you're going to take care of that yourself. So you hold them harmless for anything that even happens on their property.
And I must interject something right here, because what I'm going to say to you, if you're hearing it for the first time, it's astonishing, but this is what they would do. You would go into session and go back into prior times that you've lived, whether it's earlier this lifetime or earlier lives, and find out what you did to cause that to happen to you. You talk about, this is insane. I mean, there's value in that. But the whole value in doing that is just like if a person gets raped, they take the girl in and find out what she did in prior lives to pull in getting raped.
Yeah, it's shocking but true.
Yeah.
So that in the current case of actor Danny Masterson, the women who have claimed that he raped them, they have been sex checked inside the Church of Scientology years ago when they reported it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And suddenly they're the perpetrators. What did you do to pull this in?
Yep.
So they do that with when children are molested,
Yeah.
rapes. They cover up all kinds of crimes internally, and they make the victim the perpetrator.
Yep. That
It's a
is
crazy upside down world.
Yeah. But let's get back to the point.
Yeah.
And I didn't want us to diverge from that, but I wanted to just
Sure.
tell you that that's what they would do. So it would free them up from any legal responsibility for you getting hurt on their property. It was your fault that you got hurt. Look, there is a certain amount of self-determinism, a little bit of responsibility. And if you take it, you're going to feel better. But if you fell down because there was something wrong, maybe salt on the pavement or marbles, they got to take some responsibility too, but it'll never happen.
No, they don't. In fact, you basically, in these 4 contracts, those are what you sign. Then you get to start your Scientology path after you release them from all liability, up to and including death. So let's say you die or you kill yourself. Nancy Cartwright's one-time fiance, Steve Brackett, was a new OT8 who jumped off the Bixby Bridge in Big Sur. He went bankrupt. And he killed himself. Now, was Scientology the cause of that? Well, he went bankrupt. He's a new OT8. One of the big crimes in Scientology is to not have any money. So I don't know, but I'm just saying the family couldn't sue for wrongful death if they thought there was a component in it.
Yeah.
Church has nothing to do with it. So you do release them for all liability up to and including death. Mental breakdowns. I mean, this is like they don't want any legal liability. However, they want all your money and they never want to give it back. So
you've just summarized the operating basis of the church. It's true.
Well,
they want all your money and they don't want to give it back. And they don't give a shit if you got but you got what they promised that you'd get. There's another little added item to it.
Yeah. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. In Donnie Allegri's book, The Divine Comedy, the poet Virgil takes the character down into the levels of hell,
right?
The circles of hell, and as they're going down, there's a sign over the portals of hell that says, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here."
I tell you, I quote that here many times because it's very right. You're totally right on that.
Well, you're basically legally you don't have any rights in Scientology, and that's one reason. My argument is, if you want Scientology, there should be informed consent. They say these contracts constitute informed consent, but out of well over 100 people I've interviewed, and this is a typical question, were you given copies of these contracts after you sign them? The answer is no. I have not met anyone I personally interviewed over the years who was given copies of these contracts.
That's new news. I was never given a contract, but I've never thought about it. But now that you're pointing it out, that's really an out point, isn't it?
Well, I could be wrong, but my personal interviews, over 100 people, no one was ever given copies of these. They don't want you to have copies. If anything ever goes legal, you can get copies through your attorney, but they don't give you copies. You can ask for copies, but then that would be a red flag to them that maybe you shouldn't get auditing.
Or you'd have to pay for getting security checked if you did that.
Yeah. Why do you want copies of your contracts? Don't you trust us?
Yeah.
We're here to help you. What kind of criminal are you asking?
Yeah.
So, so informed consent doesn't really exist. They would call it, why don't you approve the paperwork? This is really done to protect the church. Now, another thing I want to correct with your listeners, this is the famous Sea Org, they call it the billion-year contract.
Right.
But it's not a contract. It's not a contract at all, Ron, because the Sea Org doesn't exist in any legal sense. It exists and it doesn't exist.
You got to get into that because that's a statement you just made.
Okay, well, briefly, this is if you read it, religious commitment. Sea Org religious commitment.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a pledge. All the Sea Org is a pledge to serve Scientology for 1 billion years. Now, when David Miscavige was sued in the Monique Rathbun lawsuit, I was there in the Texas courtroom watching as his attorney argued that the Sea Org has no address, it has no phone number, no stationery. So in other words, if I wanted to write a letter to the Sea Org, I couldn't.
Mm.
You know what else COB's attorney said? It has no members. The Sea organization has no members. It's not incorporated. It's not unincorporated. It doesn't exist. It's only a pledge to serve. I'll give you an analogy. A Christian accepts Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior.
Right.
Okay. That's the definition. That's like the opening thing you do to be a Christian, right? You accept Christ into your heart. That has no legal standing whatsoever. Does your accepting Christ have anything to do with any legal matter? No.
Mm.
But in order to be a Christian minister, you would have to have accepted Christ, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't be a Buddhist and be a Christian minister. So this is just saying that you're a devoted Scientologist. So the Sea Org has no legal existence whatsoever. And the reason David Miscavige's attorney argued that was to say that David Miscavige's rank as captain of the Sea Org was meaningless. It was purely ceremonial because actually, once you sign this pledge to serve for 1 billion years, then you sign a separate staff contract with whatever org you're assigned to. So you're really a staff member. And in saying that as a staff member, you're actually a religious volunteer who signs on with a Church of Scientology with no hope of or no expectation of financial gain, pension, retirement, nothing. You're not doing this for any kind of financial benefit. You're just doing it to serve.
Mm.
So that's what I'm saying. When it comes to the money, the contracts are very real, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to the Sea Org, pension, retirement, pay, healthcare, anything doesn't exist. So they want free labor. And Sea Org members have also signed all these other contracts as well. So
Yeah.
they don't have any legal rights. In fact, they're considered members of a religious order. And like you said, you signed a series of contracts. Even OTs, who are supposed to be powerful operating thetans,
Yeah.
on OT3, you sign a contract that you'll never talk about the OT levels. It's a bond. You know all the bonds you've signed over the years?
Oh, yeah.
So OTs in Scientology sign a bond where if they talk about the OT levels, they agree to pay $100,000 per breach.
Yeah. Per each time you talk about it, though. Right?
Each time. So this is why when you talk to Scientologists about Xenu, body thetans, they don't know what you're talking about. And one of the reasons they don't know what you're talking about is, one, they've signed a bond. They don't want to pay $100,000 to the church. They don't want to get declared a suppressive person. They don't want to be sued. And really, is it enforceable? I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't see the church suing anyone for talking about Xenu, because then they would have to admit that Xenu actually exists.
Well, have they ever been sued on that? Do you know that you know of? Let's put it that way.
Well, only in the early 90s when Arnie Lerma,
Yeah.
Arnie Lerma released the OT levels online.
Yeah, he didn't talk about it. He just let it loose with the whole thing.
Well, Stephen Fishman, when he sued the church, he put them in his court papers. And then the court papers, people got access to these public court records, and then they got onto the internet. The church tried to sue, and that put them into a conundrum, because Warren McShane had to basically say, yeah, this is the real stuff.
Yeah.
And then after that, they kind of backed down. So the OT levels are legally webbed by Karen Spank in Europe. They've been online for a number of years. But still, they don't want look, the whole idea, the whole Xenu narrative, to me, it's there. To me, it's not sensational. It's not a big deal. I think when it came out, when South Park did it and other people did it, it was like, wow, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But once you realize it's part of conceptually how Scientology works, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're right.
What matters is that you don't have any rights as a Scientologist, and they want what Hubbard called, remember the one-way flow? Everything goes in one direction.
Yeah.
There's no exchange. So they're going to take all your money and one thing Scientology does over and over, and they say, put money on account, advance payments.
Yeah.
You know, flow power, open a flow, whatever.
Well, do you know how this? I'll just interject something here, and then I'll let you get back. They say the hardest thing it is to start a flow. Once a flow is started, it's easy to keep it going, and that's how they convince you. In other words, maybe you owe $30,000, and they'll say, "Well, look, put $100 down. That means you've started the flow, and it's easier to keep it going than it is to actually start it." That's how they get you to that initial commitment, Jeff.
Yeah, and a lot of people donate $100,000 for future services. It's called an advance payment. So that means they're committing money, and they expect to spend the money. Now, if they change their mind and they say, you know what, I don't want to be a Scientologist anymore. I'm going to quit the church. Can I have my $100,000 back? The answer is almost all the time, no. This was a donation you made, and you signed a form when you put that $100,000 down that it's a donation. It's irrevocable.
Yeah.
It can only be given back at the sole discretion of the church. And if you sue, you agree to binding arbitration. Those are for IES donations, advance payments. So the design of Scientology is to bring in as much money as possible all the time, strip you of all possible legal rights, so they render you as powerless as possible. And if you do leave and sue, they have all your secrets they can use against you. And if there's nothing particularly dirty about what you've done, or you don't care, then L. Ron Hubbard policy is find or manufacture.
Right. They will make.
They'll just make up stuff about you.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things that's so schizophrenic about Scientology. The church spent $100 million on Scientology TV network. It's a legitimate vehicle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if you look at social media, and this is a message I'm putting out, they have this insane, crazy, vicious part on social media. They hate websites on people, or they engage in slander and libel, lies, or they're breaking their own contract. They're releasing confidential material, which they say PC folders are secret and will be held as confidential by the church.
Mm-hmm.
Ron, that's bullshit.
I know.
And the Office of Special Affairs knows it's bullshit. And so why they go through the pretense is that you're not going to get your folders back. Now, Laura Dykeman got hers back. She sued. She proved that over 100 people looked at her PC folders. So when you leave the church, they're going to have people call your folders for dirt. They go through them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to sue to get them back. So there's a lot of there's a lot of high exit barriers. There's a lot going in to Scientology. So that's what you have to sign, those basic contracts. Then every time you do a service in Scientology, with an org, you sign a contract for each service. So Scientology is legally individuated. Every org is legally separate from every other org. Every service is legally separate from every other service. So that's why Scientologists are always signing contracts, so that the church tries to break it down into a million pieces, so you can only sue for one action, one org.
Right.
And the Rathbun lawsuit was so dangerous because it threatened to pierce the corporate veils and show that David Miscavige was the alter ego or the managing agent of Scientology. But this is how real Scientology exists as a corporation, as a business, as a religious business, right?
Right.
Another interesting thing, Ron, what this does to a person when they don't realize they've been stripped of their legal rights. They sign the paperwork, but they really haven't paid attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, Scientology is designed to get you to believe that the group is everything, right?
Exactly right.
But as I began by saying, you don't belong to the Church of Scientology. You're not a member of the Church of Scientology. You're a member of a separate legal organization called the International Association of Scientologists. So the IS is here. The org you're doing services is in here.
Mm-hmm.
And try to get your mind around this, Ron. So you're an IES member. You go into a building owned by the Church of Scientology, right?
Yeah.
Now a member of a non-existent religious order called the Sea Org meets you in a building that the church owns. The money goes to the church. The Sea Org member gives you auditing. And Sea Org and Publix are two different worlds. They don't fraternize. So you pay your money, get your auditing. Sea Org member goes back to Sea Org. You go back to your life, right?
Yeah.
and the money all goes upstairs. And so another design aspect of the church is the author must be paid royalties. So that's why the Church of Scientology International collects a % of the monies from orgs for auditing, passes it up to the Religious Technology Center, which takes a cut, and they pass it up to the Church of Spiritual Technology, which takes a cut. Church of Spiritual Technology funds the archival projects to build nuclear-proof vaults in the ground where L. Ron Hubbard's technology is stored on stainless steel plates, so that there's a nuclear war, the tech will be safe. So, I've outlined all this, Ron, but the Church of Scientology exists as a series of what I call contracts of adhesion, and that's just simply a legal term meaning that you're stripped of all your power.
Wow.
Now we're used to doing this when we get a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I read my cell phone contract after, I didn't have time to sit there for hours and read the contract, so I took it home and I read it. And look, having a cell phone, signing a cell phone contract, if I went out of this contract, I'm going to get hurt $400 or $500, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll walk away. So if I don't want my cell phone anymore, it's a few $100 to my carrier, and I can get out of the contract. That's not going to hurt me.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to pay it, but like I can get a better phone somewhere else, better prices, right?
Yeah.
So that's why cell phone contracts are no big deal. You have to be more careful with automobile contracts when you buy a car.
Right.
Make sure that, because they're going to try to tack on hidden fees, extended warranties, undercoating, overcoating, bumper to bumper, 100,000.
Absolutely will do that. They'll try to, let's put it that way.
Well, they're going to try to get a $25,000 car up to $30,000.
Right.
Or they're going to ask you what you can afford each month. So, people are used to the commercial stuff. But when you get into Scientology, the contractual reality is just mind-boggling.
Well, you wouldn't think that going into a place that calls itself a church would have you sign papers that are to your detriment. You just wouldn't think it. So I think that is one of the best cover-ups going. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. And going back into when L. Ron Hubbard was running the show, even as early as 1964, he started implementing these waivers because he was getting sued a lot. In fact, the Dianetics Foundation of the original Dianetics Foundation out of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Hubbard and the foundation were charged with practicing medicine without a license. Dianetics was not a church. Hubbard said Dianetics was not a religion. It was a science, right?
Right.
And these were serious criminal charges. Being charged with practicing medicine without a license can get you put in prison. That's one of the reasons Hubbard went out to Wichita, among other reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main reasons Hubbard had Scientology become a religion was to enjoy the religious protections from lawsuit.
Right.
So whereas before he wanted to have an alternative form of psychiatry, or he wanted to be accepted as a branch of psychiatry.
Right.
And he was rejected by the American Psychiatric Association because it wasn't peer-reviewed science. So when Dianetics went bankrupt, he rebooted. Scientology, in one sense, is just Dianetics 2.0. He reboots in 1953 as the Church of Scientology. And then he seeks religious status, which he gets in 1957, 1956 or 1957. But then it's revoked because of annulment in 1967, right?
Yeah.
And so they spent the period from 1967 to 1993 working to get tax exemption back. So really what protects the Church of Scientology, it's built as a concentric circle of defense. Their first circle of defense is First Amendment religious protections. Then they have contracts. Then they have the Office of Special Affairs. The Office of Special Affairs will usually try to handle with PR. So that's why the first thing is these people are all bitter defrocked apostates. So they'll try to. Now, when PR doesn't work, they'll go on the attack. They'll issue fair game that these people are all child molesters or whatever. They're whatever lies they can manufacture. So that's fair game. That's why you see these weird hate sites going up. And then the final level of defense is legal. They'll sue you. Or if you sue them, they'll keep you in court for 10 or 20 years or however long they can outspend you, outlast you.
Yeah.
So it's just a series of concentric things to protect the money at the center. And the highest, the operating principle when L. Ron Hubbard was alive was to keep him out of prison, to keep him out of trouble, right?
Right.
Same thing now. The central organizing principle is to keep COBRTC David Miscavige out of prison and out of trouble.
That's exactly right.
And that's why in the Rathbun case where they wanted to depose David Miscavige, there was no end of money they would spend to fight him being put into deposition under oath.
Right.
And when you start looking at it, what value, I can go to a Christian church in my local community. I can go to the Buddhist temple, the Sikh temple down in Vermont. I'm not going to be asked to sign a bunch of contracts.
No.
And a lot of churches, fundamentalist Christian churches, don't even want tax exemption because they don't want anything to do with the government. They're very, very anti-government. So it's a curious thing that on the one hand, L. Ron Hubbard attacked the government as a criminal enterprise,
Right.
attacked income tax. But when it comes to religious protections, they want that. So Scientology wants no government interference, but they want government protection. They want all their civil rights to free speech, but they don't want critics to have any free speech. Their latest thing is if you speak out against the Church of Scientology, you're attacking my religion, you're a bigot.
Yeah.
Well, that's your opinion. I think I'm exposing a transnational criminal syndicate. That's my opinion. So this is a free speech debate.
I think you're right, Jeffrey. And this is, as far as I could see, this is the cleverest scam that's ever existed.
Well, legally, Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard wrote The Technology of Scientology, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the legal form was created by a lot of lawyers. So I often say Scientology is made by lawyers.
Yeah.
It's really primarily a religion that was, the entrance into Scientology was created by lawyers. The exit out of Scientology is created by lawyers, unless you escape like you and Becky had to, right?
Yeah.
Generally, to route out, you sign non-disclosure agreements that you will not talk about Scientology. You also, there's a thing that Sea Org members have to sign. It came out of several years ago. I have a copy of it on my blog, where there's a non-disparagement agreement. You agree not to disparage the Church of Scientology, David Miscavige, or any of the leading names of Scientology.
Mm.
So you agreed to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
If you want to route out and not be harassed, because one thing that L. Ron Hubbard wrote that was really disturbing, he said, we in Scientology are not a police organization, but we're very good at finding out your crimes. So here's the bottom line, he wrote.
Yeah.
If you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone.
Yep.
And that was a threat. And I don't take Mr. Hubbard's deal. It's like, no, Ron Hubbard, I don't think I like your deal. If I leave you alone, you'll leave me alone. No, that's a threat to try to shutter me and everyone else into silence.
Yep.
That's like something the mafia would do. So I would rather speak out, and take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune they throw at my wife Karen and I, especially Karen. Hey, throw it. They've done it to you, Ron.
Yeah.
They tried to vilify you enormously when you first came out. So
I have incredible protection, though, Jeffrey. You know that.
What's that?
I don't give a fuck what they say. Say what you want. Here I am. I'm interviewing Jeffrey Augustine. How do you like it, Scientology? OSA? This is what you created. You didn't want to let me alone so I could just live my life out. You took my family away from me. So welcome to the little game we're playing. And I'm going to continue doing this as long as I live. And I hope to live a long time for that reason alone, if anything.
Oh, yeah, Ron, we're going to be doing a podcast on your 100th birthday. I want that. So you got to promise.
I wouldn't mind doing that. I'm going to keep playing too. I mean, that's beside the point. I do that for pleasure. Yeah. This I do for duty.
Well, sure.
As you've pointed out in this short hour that we've talked together, these guys are not okay. They're not out for the benefit of you. They're out for the benefit of themselves, and they have you locked in legally. At your weakest point, you get to sign these papers, don't read them. You're fucked. This is how they operate.
Yeah, you basically are. So we've done, we've shown the life cycle of entry and exit.
Yeah.
If you route out properly on their terms, you're going to shut up and never speak out. And there's a lot of people out there who are under the radar who routed out of the
Yeah.
church, and they've signed non-disclosure agreements, non-disparagement. And that's a shame that they have allowed their voice to be taken away. And I encourage people to speak out, and even anonymously at first, tell your story.
Yeah.
Because it's so cathartic to tell your story of what this soul-killing cult did to you.
Well,
It's
I'll tell
very
you something. Now that you brought that up, if somebody wants to come on this program, I can treat them as an anonymous speaker. We won't do any video, and they can tell their story. How do you like that?
Oh, I like it.
There's
I
an
like it,
invitation
Ron.
for you.
Yeah, and you know, and I can understand one. Let's end on this, Ron. One thing that Scientology does is they engage in emotional blackmail.
Yep.
So one of the exit barriers to leaving Scientology is that you can lose your family. You'll be declared a suppressive person.
Yeah.
And you'll be your family, friends, business clients will disconnect from you. So that kind of emotional and financial blackmail is one of their exit barriers. Disconnection is a powerful tool to keep people in line. And I know so many people who are still members of the church technically, but they're not on course. They don't do anything, but they can't leave because they'll lose their family members. They'll be disconnected.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not, that kind of threat hanging over their head is not good for the church, because people who are still in the church who get to hear things and see things, they leak them. That's
Yeah.
how they handle the pressure of, like, I don't want to lose my family, but I have to keep my mouth shut privately, and they see all this outrageous stuff and they leak it. The
Yep.
church should be better off saying, you're free to go.
You know, you're right, Jeffrey. And that's a good point to end this program on, because the threat of losing your family, your friends, your job is a huge threat. And I can see why people hang around who just don't, well, for whatever reason, they just want to say, you know what, fuck you, I'm going to speak out, which you really should do. But I'm getting some signals here. Jeffrey, did we cover everything you wanted to cover?
Everything I wanted to cover, yep.
Yeah, because I have notes here on the things we talked about, and it looks like everything was handled. And I really appreciate you coming on and telling people this, because this is an educational hour that anybody who's watched this, get some other people and friends of yours or anybody you know, get them to watch the program and get them proofed up against the Church of Scientology. Now, before we exit, though, I have a little signal from my producer, Sean.
Yeah, you have 2 super chats. One from Teresa Atkins for $10, saying supporting you, Ron, for helping expose wrongdoing. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you very much. She's an old friend of mine, so I appreciate your help, Teresa. It's very nice of you.
And Danielle Demchek for $1. She donated $1. Thank you, Danielle.
Daniel Demchek, I love your name. That's a name that you'd find in the coal region back in my hometown.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We just got one more quick. You got Chris Clanotis. He's a patron also for $2. Says, Ron, Jeff, what kept you in for so long? Was it family?
Well, one of the things I would say is momentum. And I know that's a little hard to swallow for people, but you're going along this path, and unbelievably, and my wife was always telling me this, Ron, it'll get better. It'll get better. And then you go along, and maybe, and my duties are to have a successful event, or maybe do a successful music score for a film, and I'd feel good. And I think, oh, okay, well, let's see if it gets better. You think that somehow the condition that you're in is not going to exist. It's going to get better. That's one of them. How about you, Jeffrey? You were never in, though.
Well, no, I was in for a very short period of time. And I worked, and I've told the story before, I worked at Hughes Aircraft during the Cold War in the early 80s.
Right.
So I had secret and top secret clearances. And if you have clearances, if you're police, connected to intelligence, psychiatry, journalism, media, you're considered an illegal pre-clear. So because I had high-level security clearances, I really couldn't get anywhere in Scientology, and I got sec checked. And so I just went to other places. You know, I went into a long time study of Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta, Eastern practices, because Ron, they just didn't want me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're cleared for top secret, though, you're out. You're not going to get in.
Yeah, one more, Ron.
Okay, go on.
$2 from Melissa Payne that says, "I love you, Ron. Still gorgeous." I'm just making his ego.
You're embarrassing me, Melissa. I remember when I spoke to her. We had a
Patron hangout, yeah.
patron hangout only, and she says, "My name is Payne." I said, "Payne?" She says, "Yeah, like pain in the ass." It's just a great statement. Anyway, thanks a lot. Are we done with that then?
Yep.
And all of those out there, become a patron and help the show out, and I'd appreciate it very much. You can go to my website, therealronmiscavige.com, see how to do it, and you will turn immediately at that point from being a listener and somebody who enjoys it into a participant, because you're actually doing something about it to whatever degree you say, okay, here, I'm going to help support your show. So anyway, with that, and Jeffrey, I got to thank you very much. This was an educational program. I got to tell you, man.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show, Ron. I enjoyed it. Knowledge is power. Go to my blog, ScientologyMoneyProject.com, and you might find it's very addicting and interesting, especially if you're a wonk like me who enjoys details.
Well, I'll tell you, you're in a crowd of one who was able to do this program. I don't know of another person who would have done this. You've researched it, and it's a benefit to everybody who looks at this. And yeah, they should go on your blog and support that too, Jeffrey.
Well, thank you. You're too kind. There's plenty of SEERG members who know all this stuff. I'm just some guy out here who took the time to put it on a website.
Okay, thanks a lot, my friend. So from Jeff and myself, this is Life After Scientology. I'm Ron Miscavige. See you on the next episode. Bye-bye now.